Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the damp heart of 18th century France, to a place where reality buckled under moonlight, and something with claws and possibly manners stalked the shadows. Picture this fog, curling low across crooked fields, distant sheep bells clanging with no rhythm, and boots squelching through wet earth that seems just a little too soft. You're new in town, not Paris, no powdered wigs or palatial halls here. We're talking about a tiny moss-covered hamlet where the houses lean together like old gossips, and every door has a squeak you'll memorize by morning. You've come looking for rest, maybe to forget something from your past. But the locals, they aren't resting. Something's out there, and no one wants to be the next one found in pieces. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is on your end. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through morning mist arms folded against the chill boots already soaked. The trees sway gently leaves, whispering something you'd rather not translate. Ahead lies a sheep pen, or what's left of one. The fence is torn clean through like paper, the posts splintered in a way no human hands could manage. Nearby, a shepherd stands frozen. Not with shock, he's quite literally frozen. His coat glistens with dew, breath steaming in slow, stunned puffs. "You're not from around here," he mutters without turning. Classic small-town welcome. You try to respond, but your voice feels swallowed by the wet hush all around. Then he gestures with his chin. "Third time this month. Always takes just one, always leaves the head." And, sure enough, resting beside the trough is the severed head of a sheep. Eyes wide open, mouth locked in mid-bleat. The rest of it gone. No trail of blood, just drag marks that fade into the fog like a magician's trick. Historical fact time: during the 1700s, rural France was no stranger to wolf attacks. They were common enough to be recorded by local officials and even spurred royal hunts. But this didn't match known patterns. A normal wolf kills quickly, often messily, and rarely in such theatrical ways. You kneel down, fingers brushing the damp earth. There are prints barely beneath the mud. Too big for a dog, too wide for a wolf. And, oddest of all, they're in pairs, like a biped walking flat-footed through the muck. Local kids think it's a werewolf, the shepherd says, eyes scanning the horizon. Old folks say it's worse. You glance at him. Worse than a werewolf. He shrugs. A wolf is just hungry. This thing, it's playing. Now your shoulders twitch just a bit. The wind picks up and carries the sound of something clattering in the trees. A broken bell, maybe. Or claws. You decide to explore a bit more before heading back to town. The forest line looms nearby, gnarled and skeletal in the pale light. Every crunch beneath your boots feels louder than it should. And even though you're trying to stay rational wolves, not monsters, you can't help but check over your shoulder. Twice. Fringe tidbit time: there was in fact a documented rise in werewolf trials across France during the 16th to 18th centuries. Unlike witch hunts, these weren't always theological. Some involved accusations of actual shape-shifting, often linked to bizarre mutilation cases. A few suspects were found in fur coats stitched from real wolf pelts, claiming they transformed under duress. So yes, France once put men on trial for allegedly becoming beasts. Historians still argue whether these were folk hysteria events or early cases of misunderstood mental illness, or if just maybe something stranger was going on in the woods. Back in the village, people are already whispering. Word travels faster than carts around here, and when a stranger shows up asking questions, you're now the second most suspicious thing in town. The first, of course, is still out there. Somewhere. Evening creeps in early. A slate-gray sky droops over the town and smoke curls from crooked chimneys. You take a room at the inn where the beds are slightly less lumpy than the road. And as you lay down that night, drifting between thoughts, a distant sound pulls you halfway back awake. A howl. Not wolfish, not dog-like. Something too long, too mournful, something aware. You pull the blanket tighter, breath held. Because whatever that was, it knew you were listening. You wake before the sun, eyelids still gummy. and for a moment you wonder if it was a dream, the sheep's head, the howling, the unnaturally symmetrical footprints. But when you sit up and glance toward the window, there's a fresh set of muddy prints right outside, long, deliberate, and headed toward the forest. You throw on your boots and coat, clutching your flask with the last of yesterday's brandy. Outside the village is eerily quiet, the kind of quiet where even the birds seem too nervous to chirp. The fog's thinned just enough to reveal the silhouette of the fields ahead, and there, across the pasture, you spot it. A single goat trembling near the tree line. It's odd. No herd, no herder, just one goat standing perfectly still. Too still. You trudge closer, the squelch of your steps cutting through the silence like awkward conversation at a funeral. The goat doesn't move, and then you see why. Its throat is a ruin slashed so cleanly that you wonder if it was a knife. But a knife wouldn't leave bite marks around the wound, and a knife wouldn't tear half the flank off in one bite. There's blood, sure, but not as much as you'd expect. What draws your eye more is the expression wide-eyed tongue out mouth mid-scream, a still life of terror. Historical note rural France in the 1700s had a surprisingly well-documented relationship with livestock. Animals weren't just property. They were currency, dowries, meals for winter, even symbols of divine favor. Losing one goat wasn't a nuisance, it was a crisis, and this had become a pattern. You crouch again, examining the ground around the corpse. Claw marks, deep, 3 toes but spaced like fingers, too regular for a beast, too wild for a man. One of them has a gouge down the center, as if a claw had split. Then you notice something even weirder. The blood trail doesn't lead away. It circles the goat, a full loop, like something danced around the kill. A shiver crawls up your spine. You retreat slowly, keeping your eyes on the forest. You're not scared exactly, but your legs are voting for let's not be here anymore. Back in town, the baker and butcher are arguing in the square. Not about pastries, but about omens. The butcher is waving a bloody apron like a flag, insisting the moon was full the last 3 attacks. The baker insists it was waning gibbous, whatever that means, and refuses to believe in fairy tales. You take mental notes. Inside the tavern, you sit by the fire and try to warm your fingers. The heat helps, but the feeling in the room doesn't. The barkeep leans in and lowers his voice. "That goat screamed," he says. "You heard it, didn't you?" You nod slowly. He nods back. "Last time that happened, it was children." Fringe tidbit alert. According to 18th century French folklore, goats were believed to sense evil spirits and cry out moments before a demonic presence appeared. In some accounts, farmers would tie bells to their goats, not just to locate them, but to serve as supernatural alarms. Historians still argue whether these screaming goat tales were rooted in actual events or simply superstition layered over mundane tragedies. But in villages like this, superstition was reality. You spend the afternoon checking the edge of the woods. There's an odd stillness to the place. No birds, no rustling, just the occasional gust of wind that seems to sigh directly into your ear. At one point, you find an old fence post splintered and clawed, but oddly, the claw marks stop halfway through, as if the creature had second thoughts mid-maul, or worse, was pretending. You backtrack to town just before sunset. The baker is still arguing with the butcher, and now the priest has joined in, brandishing a rosary like a sword. Apparently, someone suggested an exorcism. Someone else suggested lighting the whole forest on fire. And someone else, an old woman on a crooked stool, just whispers one word: loup-garou. You've heard the word before. It's French for werewolf, but it doesn't mean Hollywood werewolf. No bulging pecs or denim shorts here. The loup-garou of French legend is leaner, older, and trickier. It changes when it wants, sometimes without warning, sometimes against its will, and sometimes not at all. Some stories say it doesn't transform its body, only your mind. Your stomach tightens. You look around. The butcher, the baker, the barkeep, the old woman. Anyone here could be hiding a set of teeth too long for their jaw. You go to bed uneasy. The floorboards creak long after your eyes close. And then, in the dead hush of night, a distant scream. Not a goat this time. A human. Young. High-pitched. Cut off far too soon. You sit bolt upright in bed, heart hammering like a church bell at a sinner's funeral. For a second, you're unsure if the scream was real or just leftover thunder from a bad dream. But then, you hear it again. Not a scream this time. Just silence. And that's worse. You don't even bother with your coat. You grab a lantern, its weak flame flickering with nerves of its own, and step into the night. The air is sharp, pinched with frost, and the village lies hushed under a dull moon. Doors are bolted, windows shuttered. Everyone heard it. No one's coming out. Except you. Your boots crunch along the gravel path that winds out toward the commons. The scream, if you had to guess, came from the bog behind the stables. A bad place for a midnight stroll. Worse for a child. The bog greets you like a wet cough, mucky mosquito thick, and full of sucking sounds beneath every step. You lift the lantern high. There, tangled in a patch of reeds, you spot something pale. You wade closer, heart sinking. A boot, small, child-sized. You reach down, lift it gently. It's still warm. And beside it, pressed into the mud, is a handprint. But not a child's. It's too long, too thin, the fingers slightly curled, and the nails, no claws, still embedded in the muck. Worse still, it's bare. Who walks barefoot through a bog at midnight? You straighten slowly, glancing around, when suddenly a snap echoes from the brush. You whip the lantern toward it, but nothing. Just swaying reeds and the dark eye of the woods watching you back. Mainstream fact, France's rural regions during the 1700s had many marshes like this one common grazing lands or sources of peat, but they also inspired endless folk tales. Swampy places were believed to be thin spots between worlds where spirits or beasts crossed over. Many villages treated them as cursed, especially when livestock or children went missing. And tonight, the bog feels very, very thin. You return to the village with the boot in hand. It's enough to wake up the council. Not the town council, there's no mayor here, but the de facto powers the blacksmith, the priest, the midwife, and the drunk guy everyone listens to because he once met a noble who owned a telescope. You're standing in the church under flickering candles with the boot placed carefully on the altar. The blacksmith is muttering curses, the priest is reading psalms, and the midwife is pacing, cradling something in her apron. You edge closer and see it, a tuft of coarse black hair matted with something you hope is just mud. She found it stuck to her shutters that morning. Fringe tidbit. Some European werewolf myths suggest the creatures aren't born, but triggered, that a person might live a normal life until they touch a cursed object, consume human blood even unknowingly, or enter a particular place during a specific moon phase. There were even stories about people being cursed just by looking into a wolf's eyes too long. France's own loup-garou lore is full of these strange, often contradictory activation stories. Historians still argue whether such tales were created to explain mental illness, social deviancy, or whether they were a convenient way to exile anyone different. You watch as the blacksmith slams his fist on the table. We wait too long. Again. We need traps. The priest objects. If it is man, we'll be murdering a soul. The midwife just shakes her head. Not if the soul left first. Outside the church, a faint drizzle begins to fall. You step into the rain, breathing in the smell of whetstone and something else iron. Blood. You follow the scent around the side of the church, and there, beneath the old bell tower, lies something you didn't expect. A lamb, or what's left of one. But what's strange isn't the kill, it's the positioning. The body's been laid out carefully, belly up, legs folded, like a ritual. And beside it, 3 stones, stacked, balanced impossibly well. You crouch beside them, running your finger along the top rock. Warm, like it was just touched. You jerk your hand back. Look around. Nothing but rain and the long groan of wind through eaves. Then footsteps. Behind you. You spin around, lantern raised hard, thudding so hard it's making your ears ring. And there, just beyond the edge of the lantern's glow, stands a figure. Tall, too tall, cloaked in shadows, not moving, just watching. You blink and it's gone. Was it ever there? You return to the inn soaked, rattled, and not the least bit sleepy. The barkeep hands you a fresh blanket and a knowing look. Still think it's just wolves. You don't answer, because now you're not sure what would be worse. Wolves, or something pretending not to be one. The next morning, you drag yourself out of bed with eyes that feel like gravel. You've barely slept. Every creak in the inn, every gust against the shutters, had you clutching your blanket like a shield. The barkeep offers you a mug of something black and bitter, definitely not coffee, but it gets the job done. He doesn't speak, just gestures with his head toward the door. Outside, a small crowd's gathered around the cooper's yard. You join them, the cold biting at your ears. your breath clouding in the sharp dawn air. At the center of the group stands a man in a long wool coat boots, polished and glinting. He's holding a pipe like it's a scepter and speaking with the theatrical tone of someone who desperately wants you to know he's read a lot of books. The creature, he says, drawing out the word like he's savoring a bite of goose liver, was seen again last night, upright, near the tannery, moving like a shadow with knees. Someone snorts. Another spits. The townsfolk have heard this before, but your ears perk up. He introduces himself with a name that sounds 3 syllables too long and claims to be a naturalist with connections in Paris. The kind of man who uses the word cryptid unironically. You find yourself half annoyed, half curious, because whether or not he's useful, he's the first outsider here besides you who isn't ready to pack up and run. He produces a crude sketch, a beast hunched like a man, face elongated, claws curved like sickles. You recognize the posture. You saw that silhouette. Someone in the crowd scoffs. It's just a wolf. No, the man says, eyes gleaming. It's something between. Mainstream historical fact: in 1764-1767, France experienced a rash of attacks in the region of Gévaudan, where reports described a massive wolf-like creature killing dozens of villagers. It was so infamous, even King Louis XIII got involved. Historians debate whether it was one beast or several, but the records still preserved describe eerily human behavior, targeting necks, attacking in broad daylight, and seemingly evading traps with uncanny cleverness. This new visitor clearly models his theory on that legend, though he's taken some artistic liberties. He talks about migratory patterns, folklore, overlap, anatomical convergence, and then somehow loops in alchemy, which is where he starts to lose the audience. You peel away from the group and wander toward the tannery. You've got a hunch. The place smells like a chemistry experiment gone wrong: rot lime, old leather, and something metallic. The kind of scent you remember long after you leave. You circle the yard, and there it is, claw marks on the outer wall. 4 of them wide and spaced, as if the attacker was reaching down, not up. More interestingly, you find something wedged in the fence, slats a torn scrap of fabric. Thick, coarse, dark brown. Not wool, not quite fur either. You pocket it. Then you spot the tracks again, leading away this time, but in a meandering path, like the creature didn't care about hiding, or wanted to be followed. You follow. The path winds past the edge of the cooper's yard, down toward a thin grove of birch trees. Their trunks are pale and spindly, barely wide enough to hide behind, though that doesn't stop you from trying. Fringe tidbit: in French folklore, birch trees were sometimes considered protectors against shapeshifters. People hung silver bells from their branches to ward off werewolves. But in some darker tales, birch groves were believed to be haunted neutral ground for cursed souls. Depends on who's telling the story, really. Historians still argue whether this dual symbolism was meant to honor nature or just a narrative patch job to explain why bad things happen near trees. You pause at the edge of the grove. There's something nailed to one of the trunks. You approach. It's a charm, made from twine bones and what looks like wolf teeth, though one tooth is flat yellowed and clearly human, tied with black hair. A hunter's ward, or something darker. You back away and step on a branch. The crack is so loud it could have been a pistol shot. You freeze. For a moment, nothing. Then rustling. Ahead, low to the ground, fast. You bolt. Not toward it. Away, because there's only so much bravery to go around, and you'd like to keep your skin attached. Back in town, you find the inn's taproom half empty and quieter than before. Words spread. People are starting to believe this isn't just a wolf. Not with the strange tracks, the mutilations, the rituals, and definitely not with the way the children have started drawing things they shouldn't know how to draw. You sip your mug of not-quite coffee and glance at the window. The glass is fogged, but there's something just barely visible through the condensation. A face, not pressed against the glass, just hovering behind it. And when you blink, gone. You don't scream. That would require breath, and you've just lost most of it. Instead, you stare at the window, waiting, no daring the face to return. But it doesn't. Just your own reflection, now pale and clammy, blinking far too slowly. The barkeep watches you from behind the counter, eyes narrowed. You see it too, he asks. You nod, not even pretending to act tough. What was it? He shrugs, but it's a deliberate shrug, the kind that hides more than it reveals. Depends who you ask. Who would you ask? He thinks a moment, then pulls out a rag and starts wiping down a perfectly clean mug. The blacksmith. He saw it up close once. Lost a finger to it. You finish your drink and decide to pay the blacksmith a visit. His forge is on the edge of town, nestled between two leaning stone walls, smoke curling from the chimney like a lazy signal flare. The clang of hammer on metal rings out in uneven bursts. Inside, the heat slaps you like an accusation. The blacksmith is massive. Forearms like tree trunks, beard like a nest of bad decisions. He doesn't look up when you enter. "You're the stranger," he says. Not a question. "I heard you saw it." He pauses mid-swing. Then he tosses the glowing horseshoe into the quench bucket, steam hissing like an angry spirit. "I didn't see it," he says slowly. "I saw what it left behind." He removes a glove and holds out his hand, or rather what's left of it. 3 fingers and a pinky. The missing index is an old wound, the scar pale and jagged. "Tried to fight it," he mutters. "Didn't go well." You ask what happened. He stares at the embers for a moment before speaking. "It came into the yard. Broad daylight. I thought it was a man in a wolf skin, until it stood up. Tall. Too tall. Moved strange. Like it forgot how joints work." Mainstream fact werewolf legends in France often describe this inhuman movement, jerky broken, as if the body was resisting itself. It wasn't about fluid transformation like the movies. It was wrongness made visible. "I grabbed my hammer," the blacksmith continues. "It let me swing once. Then it grinned." You pause. "Grinned." He nods. Teeth like knives, but the eyes. He doesn't finish, just drops the glove back on and returns to his anvil like the conversation never happened. On the way out, you notice something nailed to the forge door, a silver horseshoe. Not for luck, for protection. Back in the square, you find the self-proclaimed Parisian naturalist drawing in the dirt with a stick. He's outlining the foot shape from the bog, comparing it to wolves, dogs, bears, even humans. You notice something strange in the comparison. The wolfman tracks have an arch, a human arch. Wolves don't have that. "See," he says, clearly delighted you noticed. "The creature is bipedal, possibly only partially lupine. Hybridization is likely. Mythical, but plausible. Maybe a lost species, or a cursed bloodline. There are theories. Let me guess, you interrupt historians still argue." He beams. Oh, violently. Some say the loup-garou tales were cover stories for serial killers. Others say it was moldy bread causing hallucinations, ergot poisoning, and, of course, some believe it was all Metaphor Man's inner beast, yada yada. "Which side are you on?" He leans in close. "The fun one." You leave him drawing in the dirt and wander toward the old tannery. You haven't stopped thinking about that patch of fur you found. You pull it from your pocket and run your thumb across the coarse strands. You can't shake the thought it's not animal, it's stitched, not naturally grown, like part of a garment. Fringe tidbit: in multiple 17th and 18th century trials, accused werewolves were found in what locals described as enchanted pelts. These were animal skins believed to grant transformation. Often they were burned as evidence. In one bizarre case from 1598, the condemned man claimed he couldn't return to human form because someone stole his wolf belt. No one asked why he owned a wolf belt to begin with. You remember the blacksmith's missing finger, the stitched fur, the ritualistically posed animals. None of this feels like pure animal instinct. It's staged. As you make your way back through town, the fog thickens again. It rolls in fast, hugging the ground, hiding boots, fences, doorways. People retreat indoors. Shutters slam, and suddenly, you're the only one left on the street. That's when you hear it, a low growl. Not in front of you, not behind you, beside you. From the fog just out of sight. You freeze. The growl stops. For one long heartbeat, the air hangs still. Then something brushes your coat. You whirl around, swinging your lantern wildly. Light arcs through the fog, illuminating nothing. But you felt it. A hand. A paw. Something. You run. Not heroically, not gracefully. Just pure, clumsy flight, back to the inn, crashing through the doorway like a drunk ghost. The barkeep doesn't ask. Just nods and pours you something stronger than before. You down it in one gulp, chest heaving, and finally say it out loud. "This thing's not hunting like a wolf." He nods quietly. "No, it's hunting like a man." You don't sleep that night. Not because you don't try. Oh, you try. You tuck yourself beneath the covers, count backwards from 100, even attempt that old trick where you pretend you're watching yourself fall asleep. But your brain refuses to cooperate. Every gust of wind sounds like footsteps. Every creak of the inn feels like breath on your neck. When the floorboard groans in the hallway at 3 a.m., you don't even bother pretending it's the house settling. By morning, your eyes are puffy, your nerves are shot, and your coffee tastes like fear and burnt wood. So naturally, you decide it's a perfect day to visit the scene of another attack. You hike out beyond the north fields, where the grass grows too tall and the sky seems too wide. The land here slopes toward a gully, and in the dirt, something shines. You crouch low and find it a set of broken spectacles, bent frame, one lens cracked. Nearby drag marks streak the soil in deep ruts, and beside them, once again, those prints. Not quite human, not quite wolf. You follow the trail until it abruptly stops beside a tree stump. It doesn't veer, it doesn't fade, it just stops. Like the creature launched into the air, or vanished. You look up. There, tangled in the lowest branches, is a strip of linen, torn and bloodied. But here's the thing, it's neatly folded over the branch, like someone placed it there on purpose. Mainstream historical fact, in the mid-1700s, there was a rise in documented cases of phantom attackers in rural Europe, figures that attacked travelers in isolated areas, leaving almost no trace. Local officials often blamed wolves, but in private correspondences, many wrote of standing beasts or wolfmen with cunning. Some of these letters survive today in dusty archives, and they read more like horror fiction than government memos. You move back toward the trail, but something catches your eye again closer to the base of the tree, a symbol carved into the bark, a circle with 3 claw marks slashing through it. You've seen it before. It was burned into the wood on the blacksmith's door, and painted in soot on the back wall of the tavern. You just hadn't noticed it until now. Fringe tidbit symbols like this were often part of folk protective rituals. In some regions of France, villagers would inscribe glyphs on thresholds, doors, and trees to ward off evil spirits or cursed beings. But there are darker theories too. Some believe such symbols were summoning marks, and whether they warded off evil or called it in. That's the part historians still argue over. As you scrape the bark gently to study the symbol, something in the underbrush rustles. Not the sharp skitter of a squirrel, a heavy, deliberate sound, like something crawling, slowly, watching you. You don't wait to see what it is. You back away fast, but careful heart hammering, as if it's desperate to warn the whole village. You make it back to town just as the noon bells begin to ring and find a small crowd gathered near the baker's shop. On the wall behind the building, someone or something has left a message, scratched deep into the plaster in jagged looping letters. Let me in. Everyone is staring at it, but no one wants to admit they saw it appear. The baker swears it wasn't there the night before. The priest mutters prayers. The blacksmith inspects the groove depth and looks grimmer than usual. You glance down and notice something else, a trail of water leading from the base of the wall to the bakery door, which someone or something has scratched 4 long lines across, as if testing its strength. You spend the rest of the day helping the townspeople reinforce windows and doors, not because anyone really believes wood will stop what's coming, but because doing something feels better than sitting still. That night, the inn hosts a community meeting, not official, just whoever's willing to show up. The barkeep lights every candle he owns, and shadows dance across the low-beamed ceiling like restless ghosts. Everyone shares what they know. The boy who vanished near the bog. His brother says he'd been having nightmares for weeks. The midwife tells a tale about a wolf she found, once skinned alive but still breathing. It had human teeth. And the Parisian naturalist, he rolls out a parchment map of the region, marks every attack, every scream, every hoofprint and claw print and goat with missing parts. Then he circles the center point of all of them, the village itself. You are the bait. That realization doesn't go over well. Someone shouts. Someone else accuses the priest of hiding something. The priest blames the innkeeper's ale. The drunk guy blames the full moon, the baker, and wheat. It's chaos. But you're not listening anymore. You're staring at the window again. Because for the second night in a row, something is standing there. Not looking in, just looking and waiting. You don't move, you don't breathe, you simply stare, because the figure outside the window is clearer now, closer. Not a shadow, not a trick of moonlight. You see the outline of shoulders that slope too low, arms too long ahead, that turns just slightly. just enough to let you see the glint of yellow eyes. And then it vanishes, like mist when you reach for it. The room is still buzzing with tension, raised voices, stomping feet, the sharp rattle of someone knocking over a pewter mug, but you don't hear any of it. You're out the door before anyone notices. You step into the cold night breath, curling like smoke, hand wrapped tight around the lantern's handle. You scan the perimeter of the inn, then the alley, then the street beyond. Nothing. Until scratch marks. Not deep. Just 3 light scrapes on the outer wall of the inn. Fresh, parallel, precise, like it wanted you to know it had been there. Mainstream historical fact: in several rural French villages during the 1700s, parish records actually included notations on claw-like scratches found on churches' homes, even crypt doors. Though typically dismissed as wolf behavior or vandalism, some towns treated them as marks of a curse. Priests would anoint walls with holy oil and hang crucifixes over every scratch, just in case. You press your hand against the wood. The gouges are shallow, but they sting your fingers, as if whatever made them left behind more than splinters. You return inside, and the meeting breaks up quickly after that. No one wants to be caught outside. No one wants to admit they're afraid, but no one sticks around either. They scatter like dry leaves in a strong wind. You linger a moment longer, chatting quietly with the barkeep. You really think it's a man you ask. He nods, a man once, but not anymore. You retire to your room, though sleep is a suggestion at best. The inn walls creak like they're trying to whisper something to you, and the fire in the hearth dies with a hiss that sounds suspiciously like a growl. You leave your boots on, just in case. Morning comes dull and gray, the kind of morning where the sun doesn't so much rise as apologize for existing. You step outside to find a crowd gathered again, this time near the chapel. The bell rope has been cut, not sliced, gnawed, and the tower door is open. You climb the steps with the others. The air grows colder with each floor. At the top, you find the belfry empty mostly, except for a feather, a single long black feather placed in the center of the floorboards. And beside it, something else, a tiny leather shoe, child-sized, worn, familiar. It's the missing boys. You bend down, and that's when you notice the claw marks scoring the beams, the bell frame, even the walls. High up. Too high. Whatever was up here was tall, or jumped. Fringe tidbit. One 18th century French legend spoke of a bell beast, a wolf-like creature said to nest in the rafters of churches, particularly bell towers. It was described as being drawn to chimes, perhaps even awakened by them. Some versions claimed it could mimic the sound of bells to lure victims. Most dismissed it as folk nonsense, though several tower bells did vanish from records in the 1700s without explanation. Historians still argue whether these disappearances were due to theft war requisitions or some clerical oversight. But in villages like this, the supernatural explanation always outlived the practical one. You turn to leave and nearly trip over something else, scratchings on the floor, not claw marks. Writing. 3 words. Don't ring it. Back in the square, the priest is livid. Not just afraid, furious. Desecration, he yells. This is blasphemy. The villagers murmur among themselves. The naturalist looks intrigued. The blacksmith is already sharpening something that doesn't look legal. And you're trying to figure out what's worse. A creature that can't enter holy ground, or one that chooses to. Later that day, the midwife pulls you aside. Her cottage is cluttered and warm, the air thick with herbs and something metallic. She tells you about the old stories, not the bedtime tales, the forbidden ones. About men who hunted beasts and became them. About villages cursed after unjust executions. About revenants' souls that returned not for revenge, but out of confusion. Torn between beast and man instinct and memory. She presses something into your hand. It's a necklace, a tiny charm carved from bone strung on twine. It won't stop it, she says, but it might buy you a heartbeat. You thank her, even though you're not sure what to believe anymore. That evening, as the fog creeps back in like a secret, you sit outside the inn and watch the village settle. Lanterns glow like soft stars in the windows. Somewhere a dog barks and then abruptly stops. The charm around your neck feels heavier than it should. And just as you're about to go back inside, something flickers in the corner of your eye. Movement on the chapel roof. A shape upright, watching, waiting, and then it's gone again. You close the door behind you, bolting it tight. You don't sleep. Again, morning doesn't break so much as it seeps through the gaps in the shutters. You're still in your clothes, half sitting, half slumped in a chair near the fireplace. Your neck aches, your eyes burn, and your thoughts are stuck on a loop. The feather, the shoe, the words on the chapel floor don't ring it. Why would something fear a bell? Or worse, why would it warn you not to? You head out into the damp streets where the overnight fog still clings like smoke from a forgotten fire. The blacksmith is already hammering away. He gives you a glance, then jerks his head toward the road. The king's men arrived. You follow his gaze and see them 5 mounted riders in dark coats muskets slung casually at their backs, expressions already soured by the smell of livestock and superstition. Their leader, a man with a powdered wig, and the smirk of someone convinced he's smarter than everyone in the room, dismounts and starts issuing orders like he owns the sky. Where's the body he demands? Where's the evidence? You explain slowly, carefully, that there is no body. Just tracks, torn flesh, missing children, and a growing list of animals left in unsettling positions. He sighs, loudly. You people, you always jump to monsters when your goats die. It's probably bandits, or bears, or both. Mainstream fact, under Louis XIV, Paris often sent envoys to rural regions to restore order, usually through dismissing local concerns and scribbling half-hearted reports. In the infamous Beast of Gévaudan case, multiple royal hunters were sent, and most of them laughed off villagers' claims until several of their own were attacked. This official, let's call him Delorme, is cut from the same cloth. He's skeptical loud about it and not remotely interested in what the townsfolk are actually saying. So of course he decides to go on a hunt. You find yourself pulled along, not because you believe he'll succeed, but because if he doesn't come back, maybe Paris will finally take this seriously. You head out with him and 2 soldiers into the hills east of the village. The sun is high, the air biting. The trail is hard to follow, muddy, interrupted by patches of rock, but then the dogs freeze. Not whimper, not bark. They lock up, statues and fur eyes, wide bodies trembling. The handler whispers they've scented it. Then the silence breaks. Snap a branch, a rustle, something moving fast, just beyond the ridge. Delorme shouts. The men raise their muskets. You brace, and then something leaps into the clearing. Not the beast. A man, or close. He's naked, his skin caked in mud, and dried blood hair, wild eyes glazed like old glass. He crashes into a tree and collapses, twitching, snarling like an animal. One of the soldiers raises his musket. You throw your hand out. Don't shoot. He's still breathing. Barely. You kneel beside him and see it scratches all along his chest, but not self-inflicted, like he was attacked. And then you see something worse. A brand, burned into his side. That same circular symbol with 3 claw marks. You help carry him back to town. They lock him in the old jailhouse, the kind with a straw floor and more rats than mercy. Delorme insists he's just a madman, but you're not so sure, because later that night when you creep into the cell to check on him, you find him curled in the corner, muttering. He's repeating something, over and over. Don't let it hear the bell. You lean closer. Why? He looks up, and for a heartbeat, his eyes seem to glow in the candlelight. Because it remembers. Fringe tidbit. In a few obscure French texts from the 1700s, there are accounts of creatures referred to as l'homme-bête, beastmen, said to retain fragments of memory, even in their monstrous form. Some believe these memories could be triggered by sound music bells' voices. It was both a curse and a weakness. If it remembers 1 record notes, it may hesitate, but only for a moment. Historians still argue whether these tales were poetic metaphor, misunderstood psychology, or literal testimony from terrified villagers. You leave the cell shaken, not because of what he said, but because of what you felt in that moment, something shared, some half-recognized emotion buried behind those eyes. Recognition. You try to sleep again. You don't succeed. Instead, you write down everything. The prints, the feather, the marks, the warning. You lay it all out like puzzle pieces, hoping for a pattern. And slowly, something begins to take shape. This creature doesn't just kill. It leaves messages. It circles. It remembers. And it's circling you. The next morning, Delorme is gone, packed up, left without warning. He claims his men were needed elsewhere. But rumor has it, he heard scratching at his window and decided Paris could handle this one on its own. Delorme's sudden exit leaves a vacuum, one filled by whispers, sharpened tools, and rising dread. With no official authority left, the town begins to look inward. Suspicion spreads like rot. Eyes linger too long. Doors lock earlier. The priest starts sprinkling holy water over the livestock. And you find yourself drawn back to the jailhouse. The man you helped capture the branded mud-caked wild man hasn't spoken again. Not a word. Just sits in the corner, knees drawn to chest, rocking slowly. His eyes follow movement, but his mind seems stuck elsewhere. Somewhere dark, somewhere deep. You bring him food, water, a blanket. He touches none of it. But on the third night, when you enter the cell to check on him, you see something different. He's drawing. In the dirt floor, using a bit of bone. Thin, careful lines, circles, symbols. The same one branded on his skin, repeated again and again, interrupted only by a single word scrawled in jagged French. Chasseur. Hunter. You ask him gently, were you hunting it? He doesn't answer. You press, or were you it? He looks up slowly. His eyes lock with yours, and for a flicker of a second, something surfaces. Sadness, or guilt, or something that only used to be human. Then he speaks. Only 3 words. It found me. Mainstream historical fact, during the mid-18th century, there were scattered records of isolated individuals found wandering France's forests in a near feral state. Sometimes they were believed to be hermits, other times escaped prisoners or war-traumatized deserters. But a handful of these cases made it into church records and private journals, not because of who they were, but what they said. Testimonies of having been hunted by something that walks as man, but feeds as beast. You leave the cell disturbed, because if he was the creature, what is he now? And if he wasn't, then what happened to the hunter he claims to be? You head to the church to speak with Father Maricourt. The priest is older than most of the buildings here, with knobby hands, sunken eyes, and a voice like wind over stone. He listens carefully as you describe the man's words, the drawings, the brand. He nods slowly. I've seen that symbol before, he says. Long ago. When I was an altar boy, a traveler passed through scarred, shaken, said he'd fought a loup-garou in Lorraine, carried the same mark on his chest, said it wasn't a warning, said it was an invitation. Invitation to what? The priest turns toward the bell tower, eyes narrowing, to join the pack. You pause. There's more than one. Fringe tidbit among fringe French folklore circles, there's a lesser-known idea that loups-garous operate not as lone monsters but as covens, packs, with hierarchy, territory, and strange rites. The belief was that one wolf would appear first, testing the village, studying it, preparing it for others. Historians still argue whether this idea was born from paranoia or if it reflected deeper fears of infiltration, strangers blending and turning neighbor against neighbor. You leave the church more unsettled than before because the attacks are escalating. The next morning, the midwife's cottage is ransacked. Herb's shredded furniture overturned, and on the wall, scratched deep into the wood, a new message. Almost ready. You and the townsfolk comb the area. No tracks, no sounds, just more unease. That night, no one sleeps, except the hunter in the cell. He finally stops rocking, lays down, and breathes deeply, like someone who's waiting. The following evening, as the fog rolls in thicker than ever, the naturalist bursts into the tavern with a grin like he's discovered the meaning of life. I've mapped the sightings, he says, spreading out a new hand-drawn chart on the table. You lean in. He's marked every attack, every missing animal, every sighting. You trace them with your finger and feel the blood drain from your face. They form a spiral, a perfect one, and in the center, the chapel bell. He smiles, clearly pleased. See, it's drawn to the sound, to the metal. Maybe the vibration interferes with it. No, you interrupt. It's not interference. You remember the message, don't ring it. It's a signal, a summoning. You all stare at the chart in silence, because if this thing's been circling the bell, it means one of two things. It's afraid of what happens when it rings, or it's waiting for someone else to do it. You go to bed that night without a fire, without food, just the charm still around your neck, and a bone-deep feeling that something is about to change. And sure enough, at midnight, the bell rings. One clear, echoing toll through the fog. Then a second, then a third. You bolt upright, and outside, the howling begins. But this time, it's not just one voice. It's many. You don't remember putting your boots on or grabbing the lantern. You just know you're running through the fog toward the chapel, every hair on your body standing upright like 1,000 tiny warning flags. The bell continues its slow, haunting toll. 4, 5, each one slicing through the night like a blade. Somewhere beyond the walls of mist, dogs bark, chickens panic, and something big knocks over a cart with a crash that echoes like thunder. You arrive at the chapel steps just in time to see the rope swinging on its own. Nobody's holding it. You take the stairs 2 at a time and push through the heavy doors. Inside, the air is heavy with candle smoke, incense, and the tang of iron. The pews are empty. The altar is untouched. But the rope keeps moving. You crane your neck upward and squint into the bell tower shaft. The light from your lantern flickers against the stone. You see motion. Not a figure, just the faintest ripple of something pulling the rope from above. And then it stops. Silence descends so quickly it punches a hole in your ears. You hold your breath. Nothing. Until, boom, a door slams at the back of the chapel. You spin around just in time to see a shape slink through the fogged-up glass of the side window. Something tall. Something that didn't open the door, it just passed through it. You don't follow it. Not yet. Instead, you run up the belfry stairs, boots echoing with each step. Your gut says if you wait too long, whatever's up there will be down here. The climb takes forever. At the top, you push open the trapdoor to the bell room and are immediately struck by the cold and the smell. Something between wet fur and moldy leather. Then you see them. Claw marks. Everywhere. Some old, some fresh. The walls are shredded. The bell itself is slick with something dark. But more than that, underneath the bell, carved into the floorboards, is that same spiral pattern. And at its center, a handprint. Human. Still wet. Mainstream historical fact in isolated churches across Europe, particularly in France and Germany. Clergy sometimes found unusual markings in their bell towers, spirals, crosses made of bone, even animal parts arranged with ritual precision. Most assumed these were signs of local cults or deranged individuals, but a few more mystical-minded clerics believed these signs were meant for the bell itself. They called them sound glyphs, symbols to direct or control spiritual resonance. Historians still argue whether these symbols had real religious origins or were just superstitions stacked like stones over centuries. You don't touch the print. You don't need to, because you know whose hand it is. The hunter. He rang the bell. You race down the stairs 2 at a time, heart thudding with every bounce, and burst back out into the night. And that's when you hear it. Not a howl. Not a scream. Breathing. Close. Heavy. Wet. You shine your lantern toward the church garden and it catches something. A figure standing, watching, still. Too tall, legs too long, shoulders hunched like a marionette with tangled strings. Its head cocks sideways, curious, almost childlike. Then it runs. Not away. Toward you. You don't scream. You move. Slam the chapel doors shut behind you, drop the wooden crossbar into place, and back away as the thing crashes into them with a sickening thump. Wood groans. Screams echo from inside the town now. Too many. Too far apart to be a single attacker. This isn't just one creature anymore. The bell didn't summon it. It summoned them. You retreat to the jailhouse. The hunter is gone. Chain snapped. Cell empty. But scratched into the wall, 4 deep gouges running parallel. The mark of the pack. Fringe tidbit. Some versions of the loup-garou legend speak of incomplete transformations, half-beasts who only fully become their monstrous selves when the alpha is near. These partials could live as humans for years, even decades, without ever knowing what they were, until the signal came, until the bell rang. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphors for social conformity trauma or literal encoded fears of invasion from within, but in places like this, it didn't matter. The fear was real. You run back through the village square. Windows are broken, fires are starting, people scream for help or howl like beasts. You see the naturalist swinging a pitchfork wildly at something you refuse to get a good look at. The blacksmith fights barehanded, roaring his hammer already soaked with blood. Yours or theirs, you're not sure. You duck behind a wagon, catch your breath, and feel something brush past you in the dark. Not claws, not teeth, just air. And that's somehow worse, because now you know it's not always what you see. It's what watches, what waits, and what remembers the sound of the bell. Smoke curls into the sky. Screams echo like church bells gone wrong. The village is no longer a village, it's a hunting ground, and the hunters are not human. You crouch behind the wagon, heart pounding like a war drum. Your breath fogs in the air, short and sharp. From this angle, you can see the inn sign swinging in the wind, its chain half snapped. You remember the warmth of its fire, the barkeep's steady silence. That feels like a lifetime ago. A figure sprints across the square, barefoot, bleeding, wild-eyed. It's the baker, or what's left of him. Behind him lopes something huge, dark and low to the ground. You catch only glimpses, a long, sinewed back, limbs that bend wrong, a mouth that grins. The creature doesn't pounce. It follows, leisurely, like it knows he won't get far. You duck lower. The baker doesn't scream when it catches him. That silence is worse than any sound. You try not to gag, you fail. You wipe your mouth and force yourself up. You can't stay here. You need answers, a plan, a way out. And there's only one place left you haven't searched. The town's archives. Mainstream historical fact, nearly every village in pre-revolutionary France had some form of record-keeping, usually stored by the parish. Births, deaths, marriages, plagues. But in some places, particularly ones with old foundations, those records went deeper. Back centuries. Into stories, folklore, unexplained events. They weren't just ledgers, they were warnings. You sprint through the back alleys, ducking beneath hanging laundry and broken beams. The church looms ahead again, half shrouded in fog bells, still trembling from its earlier toll. You slip around the side and into the small stone building tucked behind it, the archive. Inside, it's cold still and too quiet. You wedge a chair under the door latch like that would stop them and head straight to the back shelves. Scrolls, tomes, ledgers, most too moldy to open. You grab anything that looks older than the blacksmith piling them on a nearby table. You flip through one with shaking fingers. And then pay dirt. A page dated 1612. The ink faded but legible. You squint at the writing. The mark of the 3 talons appeared again on the doors of the sick house. A child vanished the same night. Those marked with the circle were never seen again. The bell tolled 3 times, and then silence until the next moon. You flip to the next entry, another town, another symbol, another bell. Always 3 tolls, always the same pattern. A slow invasion, and in every case, one word scratched into the margin over and over: chasseur. Fringe tidbit. Among secret ecclesiastical orders of the time, there were rumors of a rogue group known as les chasseurs gris, the Gray Hunters. They supposedly moved from village to village, tracking shapeshifters, beasts, and demonic creatures. Their sigil, a silver spiral. Their motto, "It remembers, so do we." Their existence was never proven, but several outlawed religious texts mention them obliquely as both saviors and heretics. Historians still argue whether these hunters were real or just the projection of a frightened population's desire for justice against the unexplainable. You find a crude sketch tucked between pages. A beast, upright, human-shaped, but with elongated jaws, curved claws, and 3 eyes. One on its forehead. For remembering. You hear something outside. You snuff your candle instantly. Footsteps. Heavy, wet, in the gravel just beyond the door. Then a low sound. Not quite a growl, not quite speech. A kind of chuffing, like a beast clearing its throat or trying to mimic a laugh. You crouch behind a stack of ledgers and hold your breath. The door handle turns. Once. Twice. The creature doesn't push. It waits. Testing. You hear it lean in. Sniff. You clutch the charm around your neck until it cuts into your palm. And then silence. You wait a full 5 minutes before moving. When you finally risk a glance out the window, there's only the fog, but scratched across the glass pane in reverse so you can read it from inside. You ring. You grab the sketch, the ledger, and the charm and bolt from the archive. The village is chaos. Fires burning unchecked. The tavern door is hanging loose. The blacksmith's forge is cold. People are running, but there's nowhere left to run to. You duck into the chapel again and find the priest. He's not dead, but he's not quite awake either. Kneeling before the altar, whispering prayers to saints who aren't listening. His fingers are bleeding. You follow the trail to the bell rope. It's wet. You crouch beside him. Who rang it, you whisper. His eyes shift to you slowly, like waking from a dream he never wanted. He did, the priest mutters. The hunter said he had to. Said it would make them come. Said we had to see it. Why, you ask? The priest smiles, but it's not relief, because this village forgot. He looks up at the crucifix and his voice drops to a whisper. But they remembered, and outside you hear it again, the howling. But this time, it's coming from every direction. You bolt the chapel doors again, but you know they won't hold. Wood is just suggestion when something that strong wants inside. The priest slumps against the altar. You stay by him a moment, but his breathing slows into that eerie calm people get right before slipping away. Not death, but disconnection. He's not present anymore, just a vessel whispering someone else's story. So you take the journal, the drawing, the charm, and whatever courage you can scrape together and leave him there, lit only by candlelight and crumbling faith. You step into the night, and what you see stops you cold. The town is no longer recognizable. Not because of the fires, though several rooftops are glowing embers, or the smashed carts, or the gutted livestock twitching in the mud. No, what makes your stomach tighten is the movement. Everywhere. Figures, some crawling, some leaping, some upright walking stiffly, like they haven't worn a human body in centuries. Their shapes flicker in the fog like a badly tuned memory. You glimpse one on all fours, long limbs, twisted spine, muzzle too narrow. Another runs past you barefoot, nearly human, until you see its jaw unhinge in mid-step. You duck into the alley behind the Coopers. A wagon blocks the way. You scramble over it and drop into the mud behind the stable. And that's where you see him, the hunter, standing perfectly still, shirtless, in the cold eyes wide and empty. His body covered in fresh scratches, some shallow, some deep enough to expose tendon. He holds the rope from the bell in one hand. In the other, a pelt. Dark, coarse, familiar. You call to him softly. Why did you do it? He looks at you. His expression never changes. His mouth opens. But the voice that comes out isn't his. It's yours. You called us. You stumble backward, trip, fall, and when you look up, he's gone. Mainstream historical fact, during the height of the Gévaudan panic, multiple supposed survivors described the beast or beasts as able to mimic human behavior. Not just physical actions, but voices. There's one terrifying account of a mother who swore she heard her lost son's voice coming from the woods, only to find his clothes bloodied and empty at the forest's edge. You get up slowly, breath-ragged, and make for the mill on the riverbank. It's abandoned. The upper floors collapsed years ago, but the lower level still sturdy, still dark. You slip inside, latch the door, and sit. For the first time in hours, you're still. Your thoughts catch up. If the bell was a signal, and the spiral was a target, then this town was never random. It was marked long ago. You remember the ledger, the one in the archive. The town name came up more than once. This place has a pattern, a cycle, and something ensured it continued. Fringe tidbit. In French occult tradition, certain villages were believed to lie on ley paths or ancestral routes. These places weren't just unlucky, they were crossroads, areas where spiritual boundaries blurred. Some were blessed. Others became feeding grounds. Historians still argue whether these were just superstitions to explain repeated disasters, or if deeper, more organized patterns were at work. Something scratches at the door. You freeze. Not claws, not fists, knuckles. A slow, polite knock. Then a voice. Soft, dry. May I come in? It's your voice again. You press your back to the wall and hold your breath. The door handle turns just once. Then silence. They're playing with you now. Testing. And if they're playing, they don't see you as prey. Yet. You slip out the back through a rotten plank and dash toward the old schoolhouse. It's still standing barely. You climb in through the broken window and find something unexpected. People. A dozen of them, villagers, huddled, shaking, but alive. The blacksmith, the barkeep, the midwife, even the baker's wife. They look up at you with wide, pleading eyes. What is it? One asks. You hesitate, then speak slowly. They remember us. The room falls still. You explain the ledger, the bell, the hunter, the signs, the cycle. No one argues, no one mocks, because deep down they already knew. Someone brings out salt, another garlic. Someone else whispers prayers. None of it will help, but it feels like help. You pull the map from your coat, your copy of the naturalist spiral. You mark the next predicted point based on the rotation. The orphanage, abandoned for years. That's where they're heading. Not for people, for history, for memory. They're burning the past. And if they reach the orphanage, the last known record of their earlier hunt may vanish forever. You tell the group to stay, hide, lock the doors. Then you head out, alone, to the last place left that might hold the truth. And behind you in the village square, the bell tolls again, a fourth time. You weren't supposed to ring it, but someone did. And now the rules are changing. You run like the ground is falling behind you, which, in some ways, it is. The village no longer feels like a place where people live. It feels like something's mouth, and you're sprinting across its tongue. The orphanage sits on the far end of the town past the fields where the first sheep were taken up a hill where trees grow in unnatural symmetry. It hasn't had a child in it for years, not since the fever came through, or so the locals said. You've heard rumors it was shut for other reasons, whispers of vanishings, of voices from locked rooms. You reach it just as the fog thickens again, too fast, too sudden, as if something willed it. The door stands open. Of course it does. You enter. The air smells of dust mold and something older, something metallic and wet. You move carefully, lantern held high, boots creaking across warped wood. The wallpaper is peeling in long strips like claw marks. Child-sized shoes sit abandoned in the hallway. You pass a mural half smeared with soot. It once depicted animals and angels. Now the only clear detail is a single wolf painted much too large watching from the trees. You hear whispers. Children's whispers. But there's no one here. Mainstream historical fact: in 1752, a French orphanage in Le Puy recorded multiple disappearances over the course of one winter. No signs of forced entry, no trails, just empty beds. The surviving children claim the missing ones were taken by a tall dog that smiled. Officials blamed wolves. The church blamed sin. But one investigator whose notes were buried in a church annex wrote simply, "I fear they woke the wrong memory." You reach the central hall and find the office door ajar. Inside, papers everywhere. Torn books, spilled, ink-shredded uniforms. But in the fireplace, half-burned, lies a large leather-bound journal. You snatch it from the coals, beat out the embers, and flip through the pages. It's a record, a long one. Dozens of children listed by name and age. But scrawled beside certain entries in another hand is a symbol, the spiral, and a date. Always a date in late autumn. Every 5 years. You trace back through the decades. It goes further than the village records, generations, same spiral, same warnings. And one phrase repeated again and again in red ink. The bell is not a warning, it is a memory. You flip the page, find an entry marked with your current year. It lists 3 names. 2 are crossed out. 1 is circled. No name, just a word. Visitor. You drop the journal, your hands are shaking. You were meant to come. Fringe tidbit among obscure demonological texts. In early French mysticism, there's a concept called the marque d'appel, the calling mark. It was said that some people were born with a tether to certain places tied not by blood, but by memory, specifically forgotten memory. The idea was that entire towns could forget horrors they had once survived, but the land remembered, and eventually it would bring someone back. Historians still argue whether these were allegories about ancestral trauma or superstitions meant to keep people from straying too far from their villages. You step back from the desk. A board creaks behind you. You freeze. Then you hear it. Breathing. Close. You turn slowly and see a figure in the corner. Not hiding, just waiting. Its eyes glow faintly yellow soft, almost sleepy. It takes a step forward, and now you see the curve of its spine, the length of its fingers, the way its jaw hangs. And beneath the fur, beneath the shape, beneath the monster, you see recognition. It knows you, and somehow, you know it. A memory not your own flashes a candlelit room. The same orphanage, a bell tolling, a child vanishing into the woods. You step back. It mirrors you. You move right. It moves left. And then it smiles. Not with joy, with understanding. Because this isn't a monster born of hunger. It's a creature born of memory. And you're part of it. You run, not to the village, to the woods. Because you remember something else from the ledger. A note in the margin, written in the smallest possible script. It came from the forest. It will return there. When the bell stops, the roots will speak. You plunge into the trees. Behind you, the orphanage groans. Not from age, from something leaving. The woods swallow you whole. The instant you cross beneath the tree line, the air changes. It grows colder, heavier, like it's pressing against your chest. The wind doesn't move the branches here. The fog doesn't drift. It waits. Your boots crunch over leaves that haven't fallen in decades, their color long drained by something other than time. You don't know how far you've run. The village is a whisper behind you now. No screams, no bells, just the dull thud of your own heartbeat. And somewhere ahead, the roots. You remember the note. When the bell stops, the roots will speak. Whatever that means, it has the flavor of truth, or prophecy, or both, which in this place may be the same thing. You slow your pace, lantern held high. Every step forward reveals more of the same twisted trees, moss like old hair vines that curl toward you like they want to touch. Then you find it, a clearing, perfectly round, silent, and at its center roots, a massive, gnarled ancient tangle of them bursting from the earth, like petrified snakes. You recognize the shape immediately. Spiral. No, the spiral. It isn't carved. It grew that way. Mainstream historical fact, the forest of Brocéliande. Yes, that Brocéliande, the legendary site of Arthurian myths, wasn't the only French forest believed to grow in unnatural patterns. Several groves across 18th century France were described in local records as sacred or cursed, depending on who you asked. And many of these were circular. Natural growth doesn't do that, not unless something made it happen. You step into the clearing. The roots are slick with morning dew or something thicker. As you draw closer, you see bones tangled within the growth. Human, animal, something between. And there in the center is a stone, flat, cracked, inscribed with 3 lines. You kneel, brush the dirt away. The words are in Latin, but you recognize enough to piece it together. He who rings remembers. He who remembers becomes. The bell tolls only for the lost. You sit back lightheaded. Fringe tidbit, one forbidden 17th century French catechism written by a defrocked monk and later burned, spoke of transfiguration via memory. Not magic, not divine intervention, just remembrance so powerful it reshapes flesh. He claimed that places scarred by grief could breathe echoes into new life. Not resurrection, reconstitution. Historians still argue whether his ideas were insanity or an early understanding of trauma's power, but the church didn't debate. They simply lit the pyre. You feel it now, in your skin, in your spine. This place remembers, and it's starting to remember you. You hear a sound behind you, a footstep. Not four-legged, not bounding, human. You turn. It's the hunter. Still shirtless, still bleeding, his eyes wide, unblinking. He stands at the edge of the clearing, doesn't speak. You say nothing. Then slowly he lifts his hand, points behind you. You turn, and the roots have moved. Not much, just enough to reveal a hollow space beneath them. A burrow, a shrine. You crawl inside. It's tight, damp, smells of rot and cold iron. Inside is a stone bowl. Inside the bowl is a bell. Small, blackened, cracked down the center. You touch it. The air shifts. You're no longer in the shrine. You're somewhere else. A memory. Yours, not yours. You're a child again. In the orphanage. You hear the bell. You see the spiral. You follow it. Into the woods. Into the cold. And then, the sound. A howl that splits the world. And something steps forward and becomes you. You gasp. You're back in the clearing. The hunter is gone. The roots tremble. Because you rang the bell, didn't you? Not now. Then, a long time ago, you were the start. The call. And now, you're the answer. You pick up the bell. Your hand doesn't burn. It fits. The clearing goes still. And then, footsteps. Not one, not two, dozens. They're coming. You look to the sky. Still dark. But you see shapes moving between the branches. And in your hand, the bell grows warm. Not just a signal. A choice. To end it. Or to begin it again. The roots shift again. Waiting, inviting, because the memory isn't just theirs, it's yours too, and now all of it. The spiral, the hunter, the bells, the teeth, the night, is looking at you. You don't ring the bell, not yet, because some part of you buried deep beneath the fog and panic and memories that may not even be your own whispers that once you ring it again, something will finish, or something will begin. You step back from the root shrine bell still in hand. Its surface pulses faintly against your palm as though it has a heartbeat. Or maybe it's syncing with yours. You're not sure anymore where one begins and the other ends. The forest is alive now. Not metaphorically. You hear breathing in the trees. You feel footsteps in the dirt like distant thunder, soft but certain. They are closing in, and yet you wait. You scan the treetops, and through a gap in the fog, you see them figures just shapes for now. They do not walk. They glide. Their joints are too loose or too tight. One climbs headfirst down a tree like a spider. Another leans at an angle no skeleton should tolerate. Their eyes blink too slowly, too independently, but they do not rush you. They circle because they remember you. They recognize you, or rather, they recognize the memory of you, the one who rang the first bell, the one who returned. Mainstream historical fact memory was a sacred act in many pre-modern societies. To forget something was not just a personal lapse, it was a spiritual failing. In certain pockets of rural France, it was believed that forgetting the name of an ancestor allowed that soul to return, but twisted searching for its identity through others. Bells were rung to preserve the name, the shape, the humanity of the dead. But what if someone rang the bell not to remember, but to bring back? You crouch again at the stone, trace the inscription. He who rings remembers. He who remembers becomes. The bell tolls only for the lost. You've remembered. You've become. And maybe, just maybe, you're not lost anymore. You close your eyes, breathe, let the forest surround you. The air tastes like wet copper. You smell cedar blood and firewood that hasn't burned in decades. Then you speak. Not a word, a name. You don't know how you know it, but you do. And when you say it aloud, the breathing stops. For a moment, the forest listens. And then a voice replies, not a growl, not a howl, just one syllable. Welcome. You open your eyes. They're all around you now, dozens, standing upright, kneeling, crawling. One drags what might be a cloak but looks suspiciously like stitched-together skin. Another wears a crown made of bent spoons and bones. Another simply has no face. But they are waiting. You hold the bell up and speak again. Your voice cracks, but you say it anyway. I remember. The spiral beneath your feet pulses once, then glows. Just faintly. The beasts bow their heads, all except one. The hunter. He steps forward, not running, not threatening, just approaching. He's human again, or mostly. His skin is pale like someone scraped the color out of it. His eyes are too old, but he kneels before the roots. You understand now. He was the first answer to the bell. You were the second. But unlike him, you have a choice. Fringe tidbit in a recently unearthed French grimoire scribbled in the margins of a chapter on werewolf rites. There is a single warning: do not ring the fourth bell unless you wish to speak with the root. No context is given, just that one cryptic line. It's been dismissed by scholars as apocryphal, but no one who studied it has ever found a record of what happens if you do. Historians still argue whether this warning was metaphor madness or memory. You lift the bell. The creatures lean forward. The roots shudder. The spiral beneath you tightens. And then you make your decision. You turn, and you smash the bell against the stone. The sound it makes isn't loud, but it's real. A crack that cuts through the mist, through the breathing, through the watching. Everything goes still. And then they scream, not in pain, in release. Like a breath held for centuries has finally been let go. The roots recoil. The spiral burns away, and the creatures, they vanish. Not in smoke, not in light, in memory, as if you've forgotten them, as if they have forgotten themselves. You collapse. The bell lies in pieces beside you, and the forest is just a forest again, silent, still, breathing only the wind. You wake to birdsong. Real birdsong, not distant echoes or trickster mimicry, not sounds stitched together from screams and wind, just birds. Ordinary, blessedly boring birds. Sunlight trickles through the canopy above. The mist has thinned to morning haze. The trees are still. The ground no longer pulses. The spiral is gone. You lie there for a moment, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Eventually, you do neither. You just breathe. Your limbs ache. Your head feels stuffed with damp cloth, but the bell is still shattered, its pieces lying beside the roots, like teeth knocked from a mouth. The forest didn't swallow you. That counts for something. You sit up slowly, brushing leaves from your coat. Your charm, the one the midwife gave you, is gone. No torn cord, no trace, just vanished, like it fulfilled its purpose. And maybe, just maybe you did too. You step away from the root shrine. The clearing feels different now, emptied, lighter, like a room after grief has finally left it. You glance over your shoulder, half expecting the hunter to reappear. He doesn't. Mainstream historical fact: in many pre-modern belief systems, forests weren't just places, they were memories, living records of violence, love loss. Trees grew around wounds, not just soil. That's why so many ancient rituals took place beneath them. That's why you came here. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a story, and stories end where they began. You make your way back through the woods, your footsteps the only sound. The fog never returns. The forest lets you go. When you finally see the village again, it's broken but standing. Smoke still rises from collapsed roofs. Shutters hang loose. Fields are trampled, but there's life. People, they emerge slowly, warily. Some stare at you like you're a ghost. Others nod. The barkeep hugs you. The blacksmith pats your shoulder with a hand that still trembles. The midwife says nothing, just places a single coin in your palm, a silver franc, tarnished old. She says it's yours now. You don't ask what she means. You already know. Fringe tidbit: in some villages, tokens were passed to those who had crossed over not in death, but through trauma. These tokens marked you as someone who remembered what others refused to speak aloud. A silent way of saying, we know what you've seen, even if we'll never say it. You sit on the chapel steps and watch the wind move the grass. Children chase chickens that somehow survived. A man repairs a roof. Someone laughs a short broken laugh, but it counts. The bell, gone. Only the rope remains limp and frayed. You ask the priest what happened. He says the tower collapsed just before dawn. He doesn't ask what you did. He knows. Later that evening, you walk back to the archive. It's untouched, dusty, peaceful. You return the ledger to its shelf, slide it into place, but you don't burn it. Someone might need it again someday, and you leave your own entry. No name, just a date and a single line. The bell was memory. The forest forgave us. You walk outside. The sun is setting. The shadows are long, but they no longer feel like teeth. They feel like night. And night, after all, is where stories go to sleep. The next morning you rise before the sun, not because of fear, not because of nightmares, because your body has grown used to vigilance, and it hasn't yet remembered how to rest. You step outside the inn and inhale the cold air. It smells like dew and ash, evidence of what's past, but no longer threatening. For the first time since arriving in the village, your boots crunch on gravel that doesn't echo like a warning. Across the square, someone's rebuilding the tavern door. The barkeep waves. You wave back. It's strange, this quiet. Stranger still that you find it comforting. You decide to take one last walk through town. As you pass the chapel, you pause. The bell tower's silhouette is jagged, now part of it missing entirely. But there's no sense of grief. The villagers have strung a thick garland of dried rosemary and yarrow across the remaining beams. Not festive, protective. You continue toward the orphanage. The building still stands, crooked and cracked windows blackened by time, but the air around it is still, like the place has finally emptied. You enter. The mural inside is fading again, but not from soot or claw marks. It's just old, forgotten. You approach it, half expecting the wolf to twitch or wink. It doesn't. You check the back office. The burnt ledger still lies on the desk. You glance at the page where your name or title was once circled. Visitor. Now there's something else beneath it. A new word. Witness. You swallow hard and close the book gently. Mainstream historical fact: villages like this one often rebuilt without speaking of what happened. Official records stayed quiet. But in the margins, beneath altar stones, behind murals, in the bottom pages of ledgers, names were changed. Words like survivor remnant and witness took the place of titles, not as labels, as warnings. You leave the orphanage with a sense of finality. The trees at the village's edge sway gently. You could swear they look taller, but that might be the wind or memory. At the inn, you pack lightly. You've only accumulated a few things during your stay: a cracked map, a scorched bell fragment, a coin, and a journal filled with notes that barely make sense now. You tuck them into your satchel. Before you go, the midwife stops you. She places a small cloth-wrapped bundle in your hand. You unwrap it. A sliver of silver, the last piece of the bell. "I kept it," she says, "in case you forget." You smile. "I don't think I ever will." She nods, then presses her fingers to your wrist. Good, but even if you do, it won't forget you. Fringe tidbit: it was said in some rural French belief systems that objects tied to memory, especially traumatic memory, could act as anchors, not to the past, to the place. They would always bring the bearer back willingly or not. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual wisdom or an early understanding of the way trauma lingers. You sling the satchel over your shoulder and walk to the village road. The path out is familiar now. You know every tree, every crooked fence post. But it all looks different, like the ground itself has exhaled. You stop once at the forest edge, look back. There's no figure in the trees, no movement behind the fog. Just a village, quiet, changed. You nod once and walk on. The wind brushes your shoulder gently like fingers tugging at your coat, asking you to stay. But the bell has stopped, and you remember who you are. A visitor, a witness, not a resident. Not this time. The road away from the village is quiet, dusty, winding lined with yellowing trees that still remember how to hold their leaves. No hoofbeats, no wheels, just your steps. Alone. And that's exactly how it should be. You follow the path past the northern rise where the sheep fields once stretched out like patchwork. There are no sheep now, but there are new fences freshly mended, evidence of rebuilding, of returning. The village isn't dead, it's recovering. You walk until the roofs vanish behind the trees, until even the steeple is swallowed by distance. That's when you stop. You glance back, just once. You half expect the fog to come rolling after you again like a bad idea, or for the spiral to be etched in the dirt at your feet. But nothing happens. Mainstream historical fact, many 18th century travel journals speak of towns that felt cursed, yet offered no proof of it. One French herbalist traveling through Languedoc in 1743 wrote, "The people spoke kindly, but their fields grew no rye. Their children watched me too closely. I believe they had survived something terrible and refused to speak of it." There's a legacy to forgetting, a purpose in it, but you carry the other side of the story now, the part that must be remembered, quietly. You set up camp that night by a slow river. The sky is clear. Stars blink overhead like forgotten bells. You build a small fire, not for warmth, really, just for the flicker of light, the reminder that shadows aren't always filled with teeth. You take out the bell shard, hold it up to the firelight. It hums faintly, not a sound, more of a pressure, like a thought just below the surface of your awareness. You could throw it in the river. You could bury it. But instead, you slip it back into your satchel. Because forgetting is a gift you can't afford to give yourself. Fringe tidbits, some French traditions speak of fragments, items too stained by experience to be destroyed. It was believed that as long as a shard remained, the story it held could not be erased. Not from the land, not from the blood. You dream that night of the spiral, but not as something sinister. It curls in your mind like a fern, not a trap, but a path, leading inward, toward understanding, toward memory. And in the dream, you walk it, not chased, not hunted, just exploring. When you wake, the fire is cold. Birds are calling. The satchel is beside you, still heavy, still humming. You continue your journey, north maybe, or east. You haven't decided yet. But one thing you do know, somewhere another village waits. Another silence, another missing page in someone's archive. And when you find it, you'll be ready. Because you remember, and the bell may have cracked. But the story, it still rings. The road flattens as you descend into the valley. The sky is bigger here, vast and pale blue, brushed thin with clouds that look like old parchment. It's almost too quiet, but not in the dreadful way it used to be. It's the kind of quiet that lets you listen to your own thoughts instead of running from them. You pass a pair of travelers going the opposite direction, older cloaked one leading a mule. They greet you with polite nods. You nod back. Then you notice it. On the mule's pack, barely visible, stitched into the fabric, 3 slashes in a spiral. Not burned, not scratched, sewn. Your fingers twitch toward the bell shard in your satchel. But you say nothing. You walk on. Mainstream historical fact, across old European pilgrimage routes, it was common for secret groups, religious or otherwise, to leave symbols not in books or scrolls, but on their clothing tools or wagons. Quiet signs to those who could read them. Not warnings. Not threats, just we know, we see. Whether those travelers were hunters, historians, or survivors, you don't know. But they knew you, and they let you pass. By dusk, you arrive at another town. Not cursed, not silent, just ordinary. You stay at an inn with crooked beams and soup that tastes like memory. The fire crackles, no one screams. You almost fall asleep in your chair. Almost. Because something nags at the edge of your attention. Not fear. Something missing. You pull out your notebook and flip through the pages, your scrawlings, maps, fragments, transcripts. You reach the back cover, and there, pinned like a forgotten thought, is the drawing you made in the forest. The root spiral. But someone's added something. A hand, not yours, drawn in charcoal, reaching toward the center. And beside it, a word. Soon. You stare at it for a long while. Then you tuck the notebook away and step outside. The moon is high, the streets empty. Lanterns swing softly in the wind. You walk to the edge of the village, just far enough to see the hills, the tree line beyond, the long silence of the land. Nothing stirs, and yet you feel watched, not by malice, by expectation. Fringe tidbit in one-band French folktale collection, Le Livre de Retourner. There's a story of a traveler who carried the end of a forgotten hunt in his pocket. He walked from town to town, leaving no trace except memories that didn't belong to anyone. He was called Le Porteur de la Dernière Cloche, the bearer of the last bell. Those who met him forgot the sound of wolves, but never the feeling of being remembered. Historians still argue whether this was allegory, political commentary, or a whispered truth for those who listen too closely to silence. You head back to the inn. As you lie down, you whisper, "I'm not the last," because you know there will be another bell. Another circle, another forgetting. And when it comes, someone will need to remember. You fall asleep, and you dream of roots. But this time, they don't trap you. They guide you. Dawn comes slow. You rise with it. The sheets cool against your arms. The scent of old wood and warm bread creeping through the window like an invitation. You sit up stretching your sore limbs and reach for your satchel without thinking. The bell shard is still inside heavier somehow. Or maybe you're just more aware of it. The village is waking. You step outside and watch as the baker opens his shutters. The cooper carries a barrel to market. 2 children run down the path, chasing a hoop, shrieking with joy that carries no trace of fear. This place isn't like the last. At least, not yet. You sit on a bench outside the inn and begin to write. Not in your journal this time, but in a new ledger. Clean, blank pages ready. You start simply. In a town where the bell tolled, they came not for blood, but for memory. You document everything, not because you want to, but because you must. If someone else hears the ringing, sees the spiral, finds the scars, you want them to have a map, or a warning, or a chance. Mainstream historical fact in pre-revolutionary France, local chroniclers often included folk entries among tax rolls and rainfall charts. Strange weather, vanishing animals, dreams shared by too many. Over time, these notations faded from formal records, but in back rooms of dusty churches and barns, those entries remain, and in more than one, a phrase appears. The bell rang again. You close the book for now. It's late morning. A soft breeze rolls through the square. You hear a church bell ring. Not that bell, just a small, clean chime for mace. And still you tense. Just for a second. The barkeep, noticing, leans on his broom and says gently, "Not all bells mean blood." You nod, smile weakly. Then you ask him, "Has anyone disappeared lately?" He shakes his head. "Not since my brother ran off with the tax money in '72. And he sent postcards." You laugh. That's new. You don't stay long in the village. Just 2 days. Enough to gather supplies, listen to the rhythm, confirm the piece is real. Or real enough. Before you leave, the cooper gives you a flask. The blacksmith, of course, offers a small hammer. You decline. You've seen what hammers do. The priest hands you a folded note. He says only, "It's for the next one." You tuck it into your ledger. You don't ask what it says. Fringe tidbit in scattered oral traditions from Brittany and the massive Central. There are stories of carriers, wanderers, burdened not by disease or guilt, but by truth. They were said to travel from village to village, arriving just before things returned. Not to fight, not to preach, simply to remember, to witness. They were rarely welcomed, but they were almost always needed. Historians still debate if these figures were real or the memory of plague messengers and ruined monks reimagined as symbols. You set off on the road again. The bell shard sits quiet. Your pack is light. Your heart not so much, but it's steadier now. You pass a stone wall, crumbling and moss-covered. Carved faintly into its surface is a spiral. But this one's different. Not jagged, not a warning. It's a child's drawing. A spiral turned into a snail. Someone saw the shape and made it gentle. You smile. Keep walking. The path winds toward distant trees. You know there's another forest ahead. And somewhere beyond it, another silence. Another village that forgot. Another story waiting to be told. This time you'll be ready. Because the bell may rest, but the memory walks. And so do you. You don't sleep that night, not really. Your body lies still wrapped in warmth and quiet, but your mind is pacing. Wide awake. Not with fear, but with urgency. Because something's shifted. Not just in you, in the story. The forest may be behind you, the spiral broken, the bell silent, but the world keeps listening. And now you're starting to hear echoes. You rise early. The sky outside is a pale watercolor wash, the village still tucked in sleep. You leave quietly, following a hunch, a tug you've learned not to ignore. There's a cottage on the outskirts, overgrown, shuttered, forgotten. You'd passed it yesterday without a second thought. Today it calls. Inside, the air is heavy with old paper and old air. Dust swirls in your breath. You scan the shelves, books, ledgers, journals, and one strange object hanging by the hearth. A length of braided rope, tied at the end, like a bell pull. But there's no bell. You lower it gently. Carved into the wood beneath it, he rang. We followed. You flip through the journals. Most are mundane recipes, crop reports, psalms half transcribed. But one is different. Its cover is soft leather, its pages moving. Not literally, but the ink feels wet, fresh, as if someone is still writing. You turn to the last page. There's no ink, just pressed ashes in the shape of a spiral. And one word soon. Mainstream historical fact during the witch hunts of 17th and 18th century France. Some accused weren't charged with spellcraft or heresy, but with binding memory. It was believed certain people could trap a story inside a symbol, forcing others to repeat it. The spiral was often found in these accusations, along with notes that read simply, "He came again." You close the book and pocket a scrap of the ash spiral. It's not over. Not for them. Not for you. You step outside to find the sky turning gray, not rain cloud gray, fog gray. You watch it roll down from the hills, just like before. And now, deep inside you, a terrible certainty sets in. You didn't end the spiral. You inherited it. You don't run. You've learned better than that. Instead, you walk into the fog head-high steps measured. The air is thick again, but it doesn't feel like before. Not malicious. Not yet. It's cautious. Curious. It's checking on you. You pass through the square. The villagers are stirring. You hear the clang of iron, the scrape of a broom, a baby's morning cry. But none of them see the fog the way you do. To them, it's just weather. To you, it's a messenger. You head toward the fields, past the chapel ruins, past the trees that lean too far in one direction. And there, in the grass, you find it. A pelt. Not full, just a strip dark matted worn, folded neatly. Next to it, scratched into the earth. Not all stayed. You crouch. The soil is damp but undisturbed. No claw marks, no blood. Just those 3 words and a strip of fur waiting like a letter. You pick it up. It's heavy. Familiar. It feels like the same fur from the hunter's shoulder, but it's warmer. Like something that remembers you. Mainstream historical fact, there are written reports from the Franche-Comté region in the 1760s of phantom pelts, animal skins, that would appear on doorsteps during nights of fog or moonless silence. Some villagers believed touching them would bind your soul to the creature it belonged to. Others believed they were offerings, invitations, trials. Historians remain divided. Were they tokens of folklore, remnants of real ritual, or early accounts of trauma acting through the language of the body? You carry the pelt to the chapel ruins. The midwife is already there. She's spreading salt in a spiral around the bell rope, what's left of it. When she sees you, she doesn't flinch. She just says, "It doesn't end, you know. You just bought us time." You nod. "Why me?" Her eyes soften. "Because you remembered. Because you didn't want to." That's the trick. Most people forget because it's easier. But you couldn't. You drop the pelt beside her. She doesn't touch it. Just watches. And whispers one came back. Just one. The others stayed. Why? They chose to. You look around. No howling. No screaming. But that doesn't mean it's gone. It means it's deciding. You climb what's left of the bell tower. At the top, where the spiral once burned into wood, there's now a bowl of fresh water. No explanation. Just reflection. You stare into it and see a face you recognize but don't remember. Your own. Fringe tidbit. Some French mystics believed water held the past. not as metaphor, but as fact, that if you stared into a still pool long enough, your reflection might shift, not show your future, but the version of yourself tied to a place you forgot. You stare until your eyes blur. The wind picks up. The pelt behind you shifts. You turn. But there's no one there, just the fog pulling back now, slowly, respectfully, like it got the answer it came for. You descend the tower. The midwife is gone. The pelt remains. And, for the first time, you wonder, what if the spiral isn't a trap? What if it's a map? You carry the pelt back to the archive, not because you want to, because you have to. If this thing is a message, a symbol, or some kind of relic, it belongs where the stories live, where the old warnings sleep. The archive hasn't changed. Still quiet, still dark, still lined with shelves that smell like damp parchment and older regrets. You place the pelt on the reading table. It looks wrong there. Out of place. Too wild for the quiet order of the ledgers and maps. You start flipping through the books, not searching exactly, inviting, letting your hands move without thought, like the story is choosing you this time. And then one page stops you. A name, written in small, tight ink, Jean-Aimé Vacher. Below it, Traveler Witness, Bell Ringer. You don't know the name, but the dates match the century-old entries you read before, the ones marked Chasseur, the Hunter. Beside the name is a small spiral drawn so faintly it looks like a flaw in the page. You run your finger over it, and the book shudders. Mainstream historical fact, in rare cases, old church registries included side columns, not for notes, but for what were called resonance marks, tiny glyphs that connected records across villages. One symbol could be found in 5 separate towns' books across 50 years. Some believed this was a secret method of tracking heretics. Others claimed it mapped encounters events so rare and terrifying that only certain symbols dared to speak of them. You flip the page again, and the spiral follows. Not on every page, but enough. Different shapes, sizes, angles, like it was copied again and again by different hands, all trying to remember the same forgotten thing. Until one page changes everything. A map. Not of the region, of the spiral itself. Lines, coordinates, concentric rings labeled with cryptic words. Threshold, break, pulse, echo, gate. In the center, origin. You stare at it, heart quickening, because it's not just a map of symbols. It's a real place, a pattern laid over the land. The spiral isn't just memory, it's geography. You check the marked location against your travel notes. It's a forest not far from where you first arrived, a place locals call Bois Mort, dead wood. You shut the book gently. The pelt rests beside it like punctuation. Then you hear a sound, not from outside, from above, something moving in the rafters. You look up slowly and see nothing, but you feel it. The story isn't done with you, not yet. Fringe tidbit, some oral traditions in the Jura Mountains spoke of forests that moved not the trees themselves, but their meaning. A place could be ordinary one year and become sacred or cursed the next. The locals called it la mémoire errante, the wandering memory. They believed these places shifted according to who needed them. Historians still argue if this was a poetic metaphor for trauma or a survival mechanism baked into old, forgotten faiths. You take the pelt, the book, and the map. The fog outside is waiting again, but this time it's not just surrounding the town. It's pointing toward the spiral center, toward Bois Mort. You're going in, not to forget, but to find where it all began. Bois Mort waits like a held breath. You reach the tree line by dusk. The sky above is quiet, colored like bruised parchment. The villagers wouldn't follow. Not the priest, not the midwife, not even the blacksmith. They told you the forest had been sealed for decades, long before the recent screams and claw marks, not by decree, but by instinct. You step into the woods alone. The fog doesn't follow, it leads. The path is narrow, half swallowed by weeds. The air here is cooler. Still, too still. No bird song, no insects, just the rhythmic crunch of your boots and your own breathing, louder than you'd like. You check your map. The spiral's center origin should be a few miles in, and so you walk deeper until the light fades almost entirely, and the trees begin to change. They're older here, too old, bark gnarled like arthritic fingers, roots twisting above the soil like veins. The canopy lets nothing through, but something down here glows faintly, fungus maybe, or something watching. You reach a clearing, round of course. At its center, a standing stone. You approach. The spiral is carved deep into it, layered with scratches, claws, even handwriting. People have tried to deface it, but the shape remains, endlessly reborn. You kneel, place your hand on the stone, and the forest responds. The wind picks up not from around you, but from beneath the soil. The trees groan softly as if stretching after a long sleep. You hear a voice, not aloud, inside you. You remembered. Mainstream historical fact, in the remote Cevennes region 18th century villagers spoke of l'arbre de veilleur, the watcher tree. It was said to whisper in dreams and call to travelers who carried the wrong kinds of memories. The only known mention appears in a half-burned journal by a wandering priest who described a stone in a clearing older than words that sang with memory. You rise slowly. The pelt in your satchel is buzzing, not audibly, but in your hand it feels alive. You place it at the foot of the stone, and then instinctively you pull out the bell shard. Hold it up, and something moves. The clearing begins to hum, low, subtle, like bones remembering rhythm. The air thickens, and from the trees, they step out. Not dozens, just a few. 3. Tall. Wrong. Familiar, but different. Not hostile. Not snarling. They stop at the edge of the circle. One kneels. Another tilts its head. The third extends a hand, and inside that hand, a bell. Whole. Untouched. You stare at it. Recognize it. The one you shattered. Only it's not cracked. Not anymore. Fringe tidbit old French folklore suggests certain objects heal over time not physically, but mythically. Their meaning mends. A broken blade, once used in betrayal, if carried long enough, could become a symbol of protection. The belief was that stories didn't end with damage, they ended with choice. You reach out, take the bell. It doesn't ring. It breathes. And the figures, they fade. Not vanish, not melt. They fade like shadows at sunrise, leaving only you, the pelt, the bell, and the spiral. You ring it once, soft. The sound barely moves the air, but the stone beneath your feet hums, and a door opens. Not a physical one, a story, a memory, a place you were never meant to return to, but always would. You don't step through the door, because there isn't a door, not exactly, just a feeling. A sudden wrongness in the light, like time forgot which way it was supposed to flow. You blink, and the forest is gone. Or maybe not gone. Replaced. The trees are still there, but younger. The stone spiral is intact, newly carved edges sharp. The moss is missing. The sky overhead is a different shade of blue. You're not in your time anymore. You're in the memory. The origin. You stand in the same clearing, but the air is louder, thicker. You hear voices, a chant. You turn and see them. Villagers. Dozens. Not monsters, not wolves. People. Holding hands. Circling the stone. Faces covered in ash. Eyes glazed. Children, elders, even a priest with red-stained robes. In the center of the spiral stands a man, bare-chested, barefoot. He holds a bell. Your bell. He doesn't look mad or cursed. He looks sad. And when he rings the bell once softly, the forest trembles and something answers. From the tree line they emerge, crawling, stumbling, crying. Creatures born of human shape, but unfinished like memory reformed through pain. Their bodies jerk, their jaws twitch. Some weep like children, others smile like lovers. The villagers do not run. They bow. Mainstream historical fact, one rare 18th century text, known as Les Oubliés de la Lande, contains reference to a pact of forgetting, a ritual in which an entire village would symbolically offer their memory to a local guardian spirit in exchange for protection. Scholars dismiss the account as rural fantasy, but no village matching the description exists anymore, and the forest where it was said to occur, still unnamed on maps. You watch as the man with the bell approaches the stone and places the pelt at its base. The figures collapse gently as if being tucked into sleep. The villagers scatter ash over them. Then they leave, one by one, not hurried, not afraid. Like a ritual completed, you reach down and touch the bell he left behind. You're not in the clearing anymore. You're back. The present, alone. Same forest, same stone. Only now the moss is back. The spiral worn down, the air still. But the bell is in your hand again. Not broken, just quiet. And around the stone scattered like petals. Ash footprints, leading away. Fringe tidbit in some traditions, footprints in ash were considered signs of absolution. A way to show that someone had been there, but had moved on. Not vanished, not destroyed, just released. You follow them. They lead deeper into the forest. Not erratic, not wild, purposeful, toward a new path, one that wasn't there before. Carved not by feet, by memory. You grip the bell. You don't ring it. Not yet, because you think you understand now. You didn't break the curse. You remembered it. And in doing so, you changed it. The footprints lead deeper into Bois Moor, winding like a question with no punctuation. You follow, not blindly willingly. The trees thin. The air warms. The ash trails grow lighter, then vanish entirely. And in their place you find symbols etched into bark, painted on stone, arranged in cairns, and hanging charms. Not warnings, markers, guides, and you're meant to follow. At the next bend in the path, the forest opens into another clearing, smaller this time, nestled in the hollow of a hill. And at the center, a hut. Stone walls, thatched roof, old but intact. Ivy climbs the corners, smoke curls from a crooked chimney. Someone's home. You approach carefully. The door swings open before you touch it. Inside, it's dim but warm. A small hearth glows. Bundles of herbs hang from the rafters. And in the middle of the room, facing away from you, sits a woman. Gray hair, back straight, still as prayer. You speak gently. Hello. She doesn't turn, just says, "You've come far." You nod. Farther than I meant to. And still not far enough, she murmurs. You ask her name. She smiles. Names are for those who haven't been remembered yet. You sit. The hearth crackles. Outside, wind taps on the shutters like a polite animal. You show her the bell. She doesn't touch it, just nods. You carry it still, brave or foolish. Is there a difference? She smiles again. Only in stories. Mainstream historical fact. In obscure folk tales from the Pyrenees, there's mention of the Dame de Vie, the Lady of Omen. She was neither witch nor saint, but something in between, said to live alone in forgotten woods, appearing to travelers when memory itself turned dangerous. One tale claims she was the last to unring a bell. Historians often dismiss her as a rebranded forest goddess, but her stories persist in oral tradition, always connected to fog spirals and bells that should never toll. You ask her what the spiral truly is. She turns finally, eyes sharp clear and too deep for comfort. It's a shape your kind makes when trying to understand pain. You ask why it keeps repeating, because no one listens. They ring and forget, or forget and ring again. The spiral is just the echo. You swallow hard, and the monsters. Her face softens. There are no monsters here, only memories with claws. You hold the bell tighter. I saw people become beasts. She nods, because they couldn't carry what they remembered, or because they chose to remember what wasn't theirs. You look at her. Which am I? You, she says, standing slowly. You're the one who stayed human. Fringe tidbit. In a banned 17th century monastery scroll, a line reads, "To survive the memory without changing is to defy the forest's law." Most scholars believe it referred to the psychological toll of trauma, but mystics interpreted it more literally. To emerge unchanged was a kind of miracle. You ask the woman what happens now. She steps closer and places something in your hand. A ribbon. Worn, faded, embroidered with a spiral. She says, tie it to the bell, then carry both. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. You leave the hut. Don't look back. Not out of fear, out of respect. The ribbon flutters as you tie it. The bell is no longer a weight. It's a promise. The trail from the hut isn't one you follow. It's one that forms beneath your steps. The forest doesn't part like in fairy tales. It just realigns. Branches bend, stones shift, moss peels back to reveal just enough footing, as though the place is helping you now. The bell, with the ribbon tied to its loop, sways gently from your hand. It doesn't ring, not exactly, but it resonates. A soft vibration like breath caught in a hollow chest. You feel it in your ribs, in your teeth, in your memory. And now memory is a road. At midday, you reach another clearing. This one is stone-lined, carefully arranged, ancient, and in the middle stands something new. A mirror, tall, framed in copper and blackened wood. Its surface ripples as you approach, not with reflection, but with motion. You see not yourself, but them, the ones from before, from the spiral, from the night the bell tolled 4 times. They aren't snarling now, or stalking. They're simply waiting, not outside the mirror, but inside it. And one by one they step through. You don't move. You watch. They don't attack, don't speak, just pass you. Human shape now. Some in rags, others bare. All carry something bits of fur teeth memory. They bow their heads as they go. One pauses beside you. A child, no more than 10. Eyes too old for her face. She places something in your hand. A pebble. Warm. Heavy. You don't ask what it means. You just accept it. Fringe tidbit. In some alpine rituals, it was said that when a spirit crossed back into the human world, it left a weight behind, usually a stone feather or twisted root. Villagers called these remnants of return. Some collected them in jars. Others buried them under doorsteps. No two were alike. You turn to the mirror again. It now reflects you and something behind you. The spiral. Not on the ground. In the sky. Clouds have coiled overhead, forming the pattern perfectly. A storm is coming, but it's not wind or rain that follows. It's closure. You ring the bell. Once. A low hum fills the forest. The mirror shatters silently. The glass dissolves into mist, lifting into the sky. The clouds break. Light pours through, but the spiral remains written in sunbeams. And you stand in the center of it. Whole. Human. Witness. The memory didn't change you. You changed it. Mainstream historical fact: in the final records of the 1760s, Gévaudan attacks. The last official entry simply read, "The beast no longer comes. The people no longer call. No killer was ever truly found. No explanation settled, but the attacks ceased." And silence fell, thick, unbroken, enduring. You watch as the last figure passes into the woods. Peaceful, grateful, gone. And now the spiral fades from the sky. You exhale, and, for the first time, so does the forest. The trail back from Bois Mort isn't marked by ash anymore. It's marked by flowers. Tiny ones, white and blue, pushing up through soil where memory once coiled like a predator. The forest is alive again, but not in the way it once was. Not untamed or wild, but awake, watching you, thanking you. You walk slower now. The bell hangs quiet at your side. No pull, no hum, just presence. And that's enough. When you reach the edge of the trees, the village is visible in the distance. Roofs glint under sunlight. Smoke rises from chimneys, lazy and sweet. A child's laughter carries through the air. You never thought you'd miss that sound, but here it is proof that the spiral's echo didn't swallow everything. At the chapel, you find the midwife waiting. She sits on the step, weaving herbs into a long thread. She doesn't look surprised to see you. "I knew you'd come back." You sit beside her. She hands you a sprig of rosemary. You don't ask why, you just tuck it into your coat. "You went to the center," she asks. You nod. "Did it speak to you?" "Yes." She nods again, like she's checking a box in a ritual no one remembers writing. "And now," she says, "I think it's over." Mainstream historical fact: in rural healing practices from 18th century southern France, rituals often ended not with incantations, but with silence. The final stage of unbinding was not speech, but absence. Healers believed that once something had truly passed, speaking of it gave it new life. Silence was its final burial. You both sit in that silence for a while. The chapel bells don't ring. They don't need to. Later, the townsfolk gather, not for a festival, not for mourning, for something quieter. They bring stones, each one different, placed around the chapel in a loose spiral. No one speaks. No one leads. It just happens. You place your own stone, a warm one, smooth, with a spiral carved in shallow lines at the very center, and then step away. Fringe tidbit: in some obscure folk accounts, spiral stone rituals were meant to mark places of unmade harm. Not evil, not death, just pain that was carried too long. Once the stones were placed, the space could not be entered for 7 days. After that, it belonged to peace. You don't stay the full 7 days. You leave before dawn. The bell is packed in your satchel. The ribbon still tied. The ledger still unfinished. Because this isn't the end. Just the quiet between echoes. As you pass the village gate, you notice something carved into the wood. Witnessed. No signature. No flourish. Just a fact. A closing statement. And maybe a warning. You walk away toward the horizon. The road is empty. But you know somewhere, someone else has heard the bell. And they'll need someone like you to carry the memory, to hold the silence, to be the one who remembers. The road stretches before you like a long-held breath. You don't look back, not because you've forgotten, but because you've finally learned how to carry memory forward. Not like a wound, like a lantern. The land begins to change as you move north. Trees give way to heather, roads grow wider, towns more frequent. You sleep under roofs now, eat at tables, trade stories in low voices. And yet every place you stop, you see traces. Not overt, not dangerous, just familiar. A spiral drawn in chalk on a back wall. A bell-shaped charm hanging from a child's wrist. A whisper of fog on a clear morning. You begin writing again, not just notes or field reports, but letters to no one, or maybe to whoever comes next. You document the symbols, the sightings, the silences. You don't call them monsters anymore, you call them remnants. Pieces of the story that haven't quite found their ending yet. One night, in a coastal village where the fog comes in like clockwork, you hear a story. A man in a tower who hasn't aged in 20 years. He tolls a bell every morning 4 times, just like in the village. You don't investigate. Not yet, because this time you wait. Mainstream historical fact. In the late 1700s, French coastal outposts recorded sightings of unchanging guardians individuals who appeared every few decades with no records, no age, but knowledge of things long buried. Some were treated as saints, others as curses. Most were forgotten within a generation. Historians debate whether these were embellished legends or survivors of isolated phenomena. But you know better. You visit the shore one morning and walk until the waves touch your boots. In the wet sand, you draw a spiral, not for summoning, not for warning, just for marking. You sit beside it for hours. People pass, most don't notice. But one boy stops, kneels beside you, draws another spiral, then runs back to his mother. You don't speak, but you smile. Fringe tidbit in Breton traditions, spiral drawings in sand were believed to vanish only when memory had served its purpose. If a spiral remained past 3 tides, it meant the story still had work to do. Yours fades before the second, and still you feel no sadness, because you realize something. You weren't the hunter. You weren't the cursed. You were the rememberer, the one who looked into the spiral and didn't flinch, the one who walked through it and came out still yourself, or more yourself than before. Night falls. The stars open like old windows. You settle beside a fire that crackles just enough to keep company. The bell rests in your lap. The ribbon flutters once, and you whisper when they're ready. They'll find me. You close your eyes and sleep without dreams. Now the road is quiet again. You feel the weight of the satchel, the soft clink of the bell shard with each step, and it no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a tether, not holding you back, just keeping you anchored. The wind is soft, brushing your coat, like the memory of a hand you once held. The trees ahead sway gently, casting long shadows that stretch across the path, not to threaten, but to cool the sun. You step through the hush, without fear, now. The forest ahead is just a forest for today. And that's enough. You walk a little slower. Let the moment linger, let your shoulders ease. There's no reason to rush. The next place will still be there tomorrow. Whatever waits, whisper secrets, unfinished spirals, it can wait until after one more night of sleep. You find a patch of grass near the brook, dry and warm, and settle into it. The bell shard rests near your hand. The ledger stays closed. For now. The stars appear one by one, soft and silver. You listen to the water moving over stone, to the breeze through leaves, to your own breathing, steady calm, finally yours again. And as your eyes grow heavier, your thoughts start to drift. You don't dream of monsters. Not tonight. You dream of roots curling gently around, memories of old bells falling silent, of towns where nothing goes wrong because someone remembers. And if no one else does, you will. Sleep now, traveler. The forest is watching, but tonight it is watching with gratitude. And the bell. It sleeps too.